Gamer Boy Shuichi. Written by Avachu. Read by Arashi. Blue, purple, sometimes red, sometimes green, Kokichi could swear that every color in the rainbow was a part of the arcade in some way, whether it was high up on the ceilings and lighting upon the crowd of players, or lined up along the walls and flashing vibrantly inside buttons and screens. It was almost like a fever dream, with the way the loud music varied from one arcade machine to another. It created a mixture of sounds that would definitely grate on the ears of a normal person. Except, Kokichi wasn't a normal person. He was a gamer, a famous and godly one at that. The nearest arcade to his dorms was his sanctuary, a second home that he frequented right after his afternoon classes. With his countless visits and unbelievably high game scores, he eventually garnered infamy among the players. It was so much that, at his every appearance, anyone who recognized him would flock around and watch him play. It wasn't difficult to enjoy the rapidness of the boy's fingers, how he'd press and time his movements so quickly and so accurately to the game. It felt simply supernatural. No game was ever hard for Kokichi Ouma. No one could beat his scores even if they tried. But one day, that notion was challenged. Sweat formed and rolled down his forehead as he pressed the game controls with all the fastness he could muster, a grimace on his expression as he really tried to win this time around. But, as he stole a quick glance from the boy beside him, he realized it was just him having a hard time keeping up. Shuichi Saihara, the boy who randomly visited the arcade and was suddenly roped into a match, was sitting there, placid but definitely concentrating. The two characters they controlled were moving so fastly on the screen. One wrong move, and everything could lead to a game over. Kokichi had the hope of turning things around and repairing his pride, one that was trampled upon by the many victories Shuichi had from other arcade games. But, in the end, that hope was to no avail. "Oh no, I lost again," Kokichi sniffled, exaggerating the sadness in his voice as he wiped tears off of his eyes. It almost seemed like satire, a sarcastic remark made to mock him. So when Shuichi looked to him to try and figure out what he was actually feeling, he raised a brow. "Are you losing to me on purpose?" the criminology major accused him, as though he'd finally figured it out, an irritated tilt on his lips as he observed him skeptically. It had always been hard to decipher his classmate, and if he was losing to him deliberately, then that pissed Shuichi off for some reason. Amused at the sudden accusation, Kokichi kept a grin on his face. "Of course not. You're just so good at this, Shuichi. Even if I try, I can't compare to you," he said, but the fabricated, sweet tone of his voice made it seem like it was all a lie. It caused the two to lock eyes in tension. Kokichi knew what he was doing. He knew it would irritate the other more if he made his intentions seem more confusing. It would make him wonder, was he really good at this? Was he not? Kokichi thought he deserved the annoyance. But, after a few moments, he felt guilty and heaved a sigh. "I'm serious." Turning away, the shorter boy suddenly said without the childishness, plastering a blank expression on his face. Ironically, he was easier to read with that kind of countenance. "As much as I want to lie about it, I've never met someone who could beat me like that." Kokichi leaned on the back of the chair, grasping a can of Great Panta on the table and taking a sip. Sure, it was such a big hit to his ego, to be easily beaten like that, even if he was trying really hard for once. But that just made things less boring, didn't it? From the start, Shuichi Saihara had always made things more interesting. Drinking his soda, his eyes subconsciously landed on Shuichi, and he saw him, smiling softly and giving him a warm gaze. He thought it was just in his head for a second, but when he realized it was real, and they were staring at each other much longer than he wanted, he suddenly choked on his soda. "Kokichi, are you okay?" With widened eyes, Shuichi stood up from his chair, but Kokichi immediately raised a hand while he coughed, signaling that he was fine. Shuichi sat down again, relieved, and Kokichi placed the empty can on the table. The two were momentarily silent, thinking back at what just happened. "Did you really have to look at me like that? You're such a weirdo, Shuichi," Kokichi accused him defensively, an index finger pointed at him for a second before he had brought it down. "What are you talking about? You're the one who started it," he said, as coolly as possible, though he mentally cursed himself for probably being too obvious. Pfft, Kokichi reacted out of impulse, but he didn't say another word. The both of them just turned back to the monitor, simultaneously picking up their game controllers and starting a game. And, after winning another round, Shuichi spoke again. "You know," he trailed off with some hesitation, but he continued nevertheless, "sometimes you're surprisingly tolerable to be with." Kokichi narrowed his eyes, going to the menu to change his character. "Don't worry, Shuichi. I'll make sure to annoy you more next time." The taller boy pursed his lips in response, choosing to concentrate on the game instead. But in the end, Kokichi was impossible to be with. But at least he could spend more time with him, like this.